Conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theorists claim the clouds are chemtrails, or trails of chemicals being dropped on people below.
Welcome to the Geoengineering Report, where we identify the threatened skies. We've all seen airplanes leaving behind strange X's in the sky, but little is ever mentioned on most news outlets about it. And if they are, it's normally calling it a conspiracy theory that chemtrails exist. It's kind of hard to get information about the who, what, and why of the increasing spraying. CHGTV has brought on Dane Wigington, who breaks down what we are actually seeing, what it means, starting with this awesome interview done by Polly Tommy.
All right, well, let's get going straight away. And let's put this image up from the World Economic Forum. There it is. Geoengineering is the only solution to our climate calamities. Dane, what do you have to say about that? And how much danger are we, the people, in with a statement like that?
One, when you see a statement like that, you know these operations have already been in full deployment for decades. We know from historical data that geoengineering was first fully deployed over the polar regions immediately after World War II. So they're simply testing the water to see what the public reaction is going to be on the notion that they are engineering the planet's fundamental, foundational life support systems, Polly. And they've tried to test the water like this before, and they have found the public reaction was very negative. Why wouldn't it be? And again, at this point, let's all just pretend the elephant in the sky of climate engineering isn't there. And that's what they want us to do. And it's shockingly obvious. And Polly, when we have an illegal federal gag order on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees, that should serve as a massive red flag. Something very big is being hidden behind the curtain here.
What is the purpose of spraying the skies? What is the purpose of it? What is the end game result for them?
The stated purpose is one layer. The actual purposes are other layers. Stated purpose of what's happening in our skies is solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, cloud albedo enhancement. Those are scientific terms for the attempt to put light scattering particles into our skies to block some of the sun's incoming thermal radiation in the attempt to mimic the temporary cooling effects of volcanic eruptions. We now know from a 2-year-old study from NASA, confirmation of what geoengineeringwatch.org has stated on the record for 15 years of our existence, that even a volcano creates only temporary toxic cooling at the cost of a worsened overall long-term warming. So the very foundational premise of solar radiation management operations is completely flawed, Polly, and we know that these operations are absolutely positively being used as a covert weapon of war around the world. We have leaders of countries, in the case of Iran, on the floor of the UN stating emphatically that NATO was cutting off their precipitation, thus destabilizing their food production, thus destabilizing their populations, thus making them easier to manipulate, that country. And again, that's only one instance. We have U.S. bases in countries all over the world, 800 of them. These countries don't allow U.S. occupation without pressure. And when their precipitation can be cut off, or they can be exposed to deluge and climate catastrophe. And again, we're not saying at Geoengineering Watch, I want to make this clear, we're not saying that the planet isn't damaged from countless other forms of human damage or human activity. We recognize that fully. But when you intentionally intervene in these life support systems of the planet, you have a truly catastrophic result. And that's what we see now. So again, stated purpose to slow down the warming of the planet, when in fact, we know this is being used as a weapon of war, covert weapon of war, and every single climate engineering operation is further fueling the overall warming of the planet, not mitigating it.
So correct me if I'm wrong. What you're saying is climate change, as they call it, is man-made.
Well, certainly that's the case, but we're not saying that this is the only factor in that equation. The climate doesn't know the difference between a particle from a smokestack or a geoengineering jet aircraft. It's all a part of the problem. I want to stress that it's not a this or that equation. It's a this and that equation. Anything that affects the energy balance of the planet is a part of the problem. But when you intentionally intervene in the planet's life support systems, putting tens of millions of tons of toxic nanoparticles into the sky annually and manipulating those particles with frequency transmissions, and that's exactly what's happening, then you undermine what's left of the planet's life support systems and how they're behaving, Polly. Again, this is like the pharmaceutical industrial cure for the planet. When they advertise a certain new strange named product to treat a certain symptom, and you see the downstream side effects, which are really direct effects, aren't they? I mean, if it's an effect from taking their product, it's an effect. Same is true with climate engineering. So you have this massive downstream cascading list of consequences, and the more consequences they cause, the more they double down on their programs to try to mitigate the consequences their programs initiated in the first place. Just like the pharmaceutical cure again. Take one pharmaceutical product, lots of consequences, take more products to try to mitigate those consequences, which cause even more consequences. So it's a very complex equation, and this is important to understand and remember because we have too many people on both sides of the fence. Geopolitically, we have one side claiming there's nothing wrong with the planet. It's all a hoax, which is ludicrous. We have horrifically damaged our planet. We've been poor stewards of the planet. But that side won't acknowledge climate engineering. We have another side of the fence that acknowledges climate engineering, but not any of the other sources of damage to the planet. And both sides are wrong in their own way. So we need to build bridges, not burn them. Countless forms of human activity have damaged our once thriving planet, but this intentional intervention, it's literally, Polly, a climate engineering Manhattan project that's going on in our skies, shockingly visible, and yet people choose to ignore what they see with their own eyes and believe the official narrative, nothing to see here, move along. That needs to change fast. We're running out of time.
All right, this is a question from a viewer, Dane. They want to know what exactly is being sprayed, and is it possible that they could be spraying mRNA in the sky?
Elements we know that are being dispersed that show up in hundreds of precipitation tests: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene. And that's an important one that we've shown in almost all of 100 recent lab tests. All of these elements highly toxic in and of themselves. When you combine these elements, Polly, you get what's called synergistic toxicity. We have peer-reviewed study to prove the escalation of toxicity in the case of aluminum and mercury, both of which are highly toxic, neurologically speaking, cause a long list of degenerative diseases in human beings. When you combine those two elements, the overall toxicity can increase as much as 10,000%, 100 times worse by combining those elements. We don't have study on all the other elements, which are certainly going to worsen the equation more still. In the case of graphene and polymer fibers, those two elements are used as biological carrier platforms militarily for biological warfare. That means to carry a pathogen from the clouds to the ground. What's that doing in our rain? What else might they be dispersing? In regard to mRNA specifically, we would need very extensive testing to confirm that. What we do know is in the case of CV19, we have Italian researchers confirming that they found that attached to airborne particulates. We have, in the initial outbreaks of CV19, we had 85 countries infected in 3 days. That's indicative of an airborne dispersion. We have the world's second most recognized climate engineer, Dr. Ken Caldera, former Department of Defense scientist. He stated on the record, and we own the recording of him stating this. We have the audio. What he did for the DoD was to design ways of spraying pathogens into clouds to infect the populations below. Do these dots all connect? Why would we think that they wouldn't disperse biologicals on us when we have a record, according to the Washington Post, as far back as 1977, what we knew about? The U.S. military had already done no less than 239 open-air biological tests on innocent, unknowing U.S. populations. This is business as usual, Polly.
I know this sounds extreme, but when you talk like that, it sounds like they're trying to kill us. Like we're at war with what they're spraying down on us for our children, our families. What would you? How serious is this, Dane?
Why would we think otherwise? When we have the global elite, and that's a term that they don't deserve to even be labeled as, but the global controllers, the controllers of the matrix, stating on the record that the population needs to be reduced down to about 500 million. Why would we think that they're not trying to thin the herd? Why would we possibly think that? And again, this is something that so many don't want to try to accept. We're caught between the hammer and the anvil, Polly, in this way. We're caught between a clinically insane power structure that believes they get to decide who lives and who dies, And we have a population that does not want to face the fact that the current paradigm was grossly unsustainable from the start. We are destroying the planet's life support systems to sustain, quote, militarized, industrialized, so-called society. And I know that that's a very bitter pill for most people. They want to believe that's not true. We can continue to loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute the planet forever. And that's simply not reality. That being said, again, who gave those in power the right to decide who lives and who dies? And that's indeed exactly what they're doing.
Dane, who is they? Who is behind this?
Very important question. They are those who print the money. Elected officials are nothing more than a facade. The current elections are a stunning example of scripted political theater designed to divide and polarize populations, distract them from the wider horizon. It's worked very well for that. It always has. But they are those who print the money, those who control the central banks. They fund and control militaries, thus they control countries. They control media, thus they control the narrative. These dots are not hard to connect if people are willing to look at reality, and that everything they've told in so many arenas is simply false. The victor writes history. The same is true in wars. That's the, quote, truth we hear is written by the victor. And those who print the money are at the core of all of these equations, including in the medical industrial complex, Polly. They control the narrative there as well, as you know from all the work you do and CHD does. And at this point, we have another question, and I don't want to miss this, so if I can include that, because people then ask, okay, why would they, those who print the money, those who control the levers of media, power, military, why would they do this to themselves? And that's for a lot of people an excuse to dismiss this issue. And I would cite this: how much have they already done to themselves? The detonation of over 2,400 nuclear bombs on planet Earth, which has contaminated everything alive. And we're building more nuclear bombs right now. We have 442 nuclear plants around the globe online, any one of which can be an extinction level event, as Fukushima may be if other factors don't do the job first. Fukushima, triple nuclear meltdown, no technology to fix it, no end in sight, and we're building 60 more nuke plants right now. What else have they done to themselves? If we look at Project Starfish Prime, if your listeners don't know what that is, I would encourage them to research that and analyze the insanity of that program, U.S. military detonating hydrogen bombs in the magnetosphere to see what would happen. Our scientists thought that it could collapse the entire atmosphere. Did that stop them from doing it? No. So here's my point. We're not dealing with sanity in the case of the controllers. We're dealing with power addicts, and they will do anything to retain that power until there is absolutely nothing left. Population needs to realize that soon, because we're running out of time.
Why isn't everyone up in arms over this? Why are the meteorologists not talking about it? Silence.
Let's start with the illegal federal gag order on National Weather Service and NOAA employees. They're not allowed to talk about agency operations. That should be a glaring red flag. 2, we have a population that's been trained from birth not to fight the system. Just keep your head down and do your job, protect your paycheck and pension. How much good will that do anyone on a dead planet? And I am truly astounded at the ambivalence toward this particular issue. You cannot hide from what's happening in our skies. We're inhaling nanoparticles, Polly, all of us. Doesn't matter if people believe it or not. It's the fact of the matter. And more medical data is surfacing to confirm what geoengineeringwatch.org has said about this for a decade and a half. In fact, some recent studies stated, depending on the location and the conditions, we may be inhaling, or individuals may be inhaling, as many as 20 million nanoparticles in a single breath. And that is very difficult to comprehend. You have to keep in mind that you can fit 100,000 nanoparticles across the width of a single human hair. They are unimaginably small, which makes them the most harmful of all. And now we're talking about harmful elements of nanoparticles on top of that. So these particles are so small that when you inhale them, for example, through the nasal passages, they cross the blood-brain barrier. They go through the olfactory nerve into the bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier. And now we're seeing medical confirmation of these particles, nanoplastics, nanometals, showing up everywhere in the body, the brain, organs, heart, everywhere. So again, given the magnitude of this threat, back to your question, yeah, it is baffling that people are not taking to the streets with their proverbial pitchforks and torches to deal with this issue. And the imploding environment around us should be another massive harbinger. Everything is dying everywhere. We're neck deep in the sixth great mass extinction right now. Oceans are dying, crops are dying, forests are dying, and they're not just beginning to die. We have recent peer-reviewed study from the Atlantic on plankton populations, and no plankton, no people. 90% crash. Global insect populations down 80 to 90% right now. Wildlife populations down 70+% in the last 40 years alone. We face 0 hour for no functional wildlife populations in 2026. And on top of all of this, Polly, climate engineering elements are the single greatest factor destroying the ozone layer, without which we all perish. And based on our recent metering, we likely have something in the range of 30% of the ozone layer left. Not 30% gone, 30% left. We're perilously close to functional collapse. Polly, have you felt how hot the sun feels on your skin and on surfaces when you're in an unobstructed sunlight day?
Yes, I have. When I was in England, I burnt when it was only 66. Over here at 100 and whatever, I don't even see the sun half the time because we have so much cloud.
Yeah, it's again, this is when people start to ignore their own senses, their own eyesight. But what you can clearly see in the sky is not commercial traffic. This is not, quote, condensation. I want to make that clear. That's a massive deception perpetrated on populations that their own sense of reason should dictate to them that they're being lied to. You don't have grid patterns in the sky one day and nothing the next. If this is condensation, you don't have planes making loops and ovals and X's and transponders turned off and flight tracker, which we can normally track commercial traffic. Many of these tanker aircraft, their transponders are turned off. The only entity that can do that is the US military, the only one that's allowed to do that. So again, film footage. If people don't believe what they see with the film footage we have at geoengineeringwatch.org, these aircraft at altitude, KC-135s, C-17 Globemasters, KC-10s, nozzles visible, turning on and off. This is not condensation, period. And let me end with this. All commercial aircraft and all military tankers are equipped with what's known as a high bypass turbofan jet engine. That's a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through that engine is not combusted, making that engine nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. This is not condensation, it's particulate dispersions. Our precipitation samples prove it, and we have proven it by taking a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab to altitude, top scientists in it, sampled what heavy aircraft were emitting, processed that at Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York, and found exactly what we knew we'd find: climate engineering elements starting with aluminum. This is real, it's now, and the threat is grave.
We know this is happening everywhere and want to see photos of chemtrails, weird weather events, or damage to wildlife happening in your area. Send geoengineering photos and questions to goodmorningchd@childrensselfdefense.org. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time on the Geoengineering Report.